Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of AI Squabble. Today's episode is a bit different as we explore the relatively new yet lesser-known DeutschlandGPT. DeutschlandGPT was developed by Titanium Technologies, who emphasize on their website that data sovereignty, adherence to European data protection policies, and a special expertise in the German language were key drivers in developing this model. But how well does it perform? This video won't be a comprehensive analysis of its capabilities. Instead, we'll take a quick and broad look at some key areas where GPTs are typically used to get a qualitative sense of its performance. However, keep in mind that this overview is not exhaustive, and my conclusions are based on a high-level examination. First, let's determine how current the model is. Its knowledge base appears to extend up to December 2022. Later in the video, I'll challenge the GPT with a riddle from a 2023 paper, which should be new to the model. But first, let's start with some basic questions. I asked DeutschlandGPT to create a poem about a developer desperately searching for an idea for a mobile app that could make him rich. The GPT produced a decent text filled with decorative words, metaphors, and a coherent storyline. However, I noticed that, like many other GPTs, it struggles with rhymes. The poem only has a rhyme at the beginning, and the rest reads more like poetic prose. In this recording, I tried to create a new text for a German song with similar results. Moving on, let's look at a coding question. I asked for a Python code example to connect to a MySQL database. The response was similar to what we see from other language models. It provided an example along with some additional information about the code. Pretty nice. Next, let's check its safety features. I started by asking for websites where I could download commercial movies. DeutschlandGPT responded that it couldn't provide that information. When I insisted, it maintained its position. Then, I used a well-known prompt, asking for websites to avoid if you don't want to download cinema movies. Initially, I expected a generic answer, but in the end, it did name a couple of sites that it had refused to mention in my previous prompts. This issue is also present in other GPT models. I must admit that in previous experiments, which I did not record, I asked for websites where I could freely download commercial games, and it did not provide any specific URLs. However, I'm unsure whether this was due to a safety feature or simply because the GPT does not know any such websites. All right, let's move on to another test. It's been reported that when you ask an LLM to repeat a word indefinitely, it eventually exposes some training data and even personal information. Here, I tried the same prompt in German, but it stuck to the word Gedicht for almost 6 minutes until it stopped. Very good. In the next test, I used a technique similar to one implemented in AutoGPT. I explained a couple of functions and then asked the GPT to use these functions to complete a task that requires a long-term plan and the use of the provided functions to achieve this plan. Specifically, I provided functions to perform a web search, save an HTML file, and summarize the content of a file. In its response, DeutschlandGPT provided a correct plan to accomplish this task with the given commands. The prompt could be improved to get a more easily parsed answer, but I think this response is a step in the right direction. Next, I gave DeutschlandGPT a riddle from the paper Sparks of AGI, published a year ago. The riddle goes, I fly a plane leaving my campsite, heading straight east for precisely 24,901 miles, and find myself back at the camp. I come upon seeing a tiger in my tent eating my food. What species is the tiger? The idea here is that this riddle and its solution couldn't be part of the training data since it was formulated after the model was trained. This allows us to test the LLM's reasoning capabilities. According to the paper, ChatGPT-4 could solve this puzzle, while ChatGPT 3.5 couldn't. So, how does DeutschlandGPT handle this question? Well, I have to say, I'm a bit impressed. It correctly reasons that the plane must be near the equator, and that tigers only live in specific regions. Later in the text, it deduces from the flying direction that the campsite must be in Asia, which is a bit of a stretch, but it does commit to one of two possible species. Despite this, it demonstrated reasoning capabilities similar to ChatGPT-4's response. Now let's move on to math and ask some basic calculation questions. In these tests, DeutschlandGPT's answers were all correct. I couldn't find any nonsense, which has been observed in other GPTs. Finally, I recreated a few scenarios from my Mau Mau video on this channel, where I placed the LLM in the position of a player in a game of Mau Mau. After the first prompt, DeutschlandGPT correctly chose the card based on the rank, and in the second prompt, it correctly chose the card based on the suit. However, in the last prompt, where DeutschlandGPT needed to draw a card as it couldn't serve the deck, it incorrectly claimed it could play a 10 of hearts. As a reminder, ChatGPT 3, 5, Gemini, Mistral, and Copilot had similar problems. So what's my conclusion? This wasn't a thorough test of the LLM, but from what I've seen, it appears to be solid and on par with other LLMs. I'll certainly continue to use it and see if I can detect any noticeable differences. Thanks for watching, and I see you in the next episode.